You're welcome. A lot to talk about.
Yeah, let's start with your chart you sent me here, and I'm going to go ahead full screen on me, but I'll get you to talk about it. It's this one right here, and you're saying that here's the stock market, and then here
Yep.
is what that the market has that your cycle
Here is
work.
this is what my clients get. That's the cycles. They consist of several cycles, but this is the end result. So this is a long-term weekly chart. We do it for daily and we do it for intraday also. And as you see, is the whole thing was okay since the last sell-off in 2008. Even the crash here that you see was done by the Delta virus didn't really show up. But this one really shows up going down for a long time, a year and a half. So there's a whole change here in market perspective. And we are totally out of the market and just long the VIX to make some money on the downside. But this changes the whole picture. Now, for people who don't know exactly what we do is, we don't know exactly why these things are going to happen. We only know something is going to happen. So interesting is to see, I wrote it to my customers, that this whole thing started really coming down when the Fed published its notes. Like nobody knew what their notes were. Of course, we knew what was going on. Just the cycle topped a couple of days before. And then suddenly, I don't know why, but then the whole market comes down. It could have been a virus, could have been a terrorist attack, could be the Fed, could be anything. That I don't deal with. I just deal with what's going to happen and when it's going to happen.
Now, this is kind of the same thing. This is basically the 31st of December right here. So the markets, just
yeah. This is simply if you do work. This is a quarterly chart, and the only thing I did is from the low I connected the bottoms of the quarterly bars, and this was sent out the end of December. And I said, listen, I have to wait till the end of December, the next quarter, and see if it holds the line. And if it closes below the line, then you better get out of the stock market. And indeed, it closed below the line. And now in January, which is the next quarter already, it's trading much below the line that connects all the quarterly lows. So this is not like making a line on daily chart. This is making a line on a support line on quarterly bars, which is much more important than short term.
So, are we headed for a rough time in the markets this year in the next few months?
Well, I thought we had a rough time because I made a report about how many stocks are in an uptrend and how much stocks are in a downtrend. And I think 50% already was in a bear market. There were just a few stocks that were holding up the market, like the big five, like Microsoft, Apple, Google. And I showed them what the price earnings were and what the normal price earning is. And then we made the projections for the next year, how much they're going to earn. And it was clear that they can never sustain those price earnings. So it's like the old story on Wall Street. The men go first, and the generals are still there. And the generals were holding up the S&P. I think 1% of the stocks were holding up 40% of the S&P. And once they gave in, then the market goes down. So it was a very, very clear. A lot of people lost already a lot of money because most stocks did not perform anymore.
You came out in 2020, January of 2020, and you said, I'm worried more about a 40% crash than 5% on the upside. I think the market went up another couple of percent, but it went down 38%. It was a huge call. Are you seeing the same thing now again, that you're not really, that there's no upside and that you're worried about, a pretty heavy downside? And how much is it?
It's exactly the same thing. I think we're very close, can go to 15,000, and my end goal is 5,000. It seems very far-fetched. It just do the mathematics. And remember, I said at that time we talked about it. It says 5,000 was when Clinton was in charge, and the world was still functioning. So it's not the end of the world. It could be another virus. It could be another war. Anything could happen. Another interesting point is that most brokers will tell you that markets go up around 7% a year. So what they do is they draw a line with a certain angle of 7% starting in the 1900s. Now the problem is that we're at 60% above that line. So from here on, you cannot say we go up 7% a year. From here on, you have to say if you want to go back to 70%, to 7% average, you have to go down 60% below the line. but you don't hear anybody about it. Now, the media don't help you, and it actually took time, and I don't understand why I didn't understand it earlier, but I got very good inside information about that the media will invite you if you talk about markets going up, because the companies that advertise with them want to sell. The brokerage houses or the hedge funds, and so you have to continue to say the market goes up, otherwise you don't get the advertisements. So the very few companies like us, we don't care if it goes up and down, we just tell you the truth, what you should look at, and advise the big companies.
Do you think that the dollar is going to get into trouble? What's your charts on the dollar?
The dollar is not that bad. Longer term, it's not that bad as everybody thinks. We could have a kind of a euro rally, not substantial, but I'm not so worried about the dollar, which also brings me to the metals, because everybody is writing me when it will get long again, when it will get long again. I says, well, it's still in a trading range. Based on cycles, the bull market will resume. You remember, we have a target of 2,500 on gold, but it's still a bit early.
So you think the bull market in gold, and it's 1840 or so right now, you think the bull market, you're also liking gold longer term, right, and you think it'll go up another $700-800?
Yeah, at least.
At least.
At least.
Why do you think it's going to go up?
But what happens is, I saw it, people who, we give short-term buy and sell signals, but you have to be really on top, because before it's up, it's already down again. So the best thing is for long-term investors just to stand aside until all our cycles have bottomed.
How about the what's going on in Ukraine, the war card? I know that one of the things that you've talked about, you're not really. I don't know. I mean, who likes to talk about war? But you said that we have a war cycle coming. Are we finally approaching that war cycle that's coming?
Well, right in the middle of the war cycle, but I still think it will be with China. And let me tell you something about Ukraine's situation. As you know, I'm from Europe. And we don't decide that fast that there are good guys and bad guys. In the United States, always have cowboys and Indians, and you're a hero or you're not a hero. Now, I remember you also probably, but you're a bit younger than me, the Cuban crisis with Kennedy.
Yep.
So the Cuban crisis was that the Russians wanted to put rockets in Cuba, and the United States says it's too close, right?
Yep.
Now that's the same thing going in Ukraine. Ukraine now he wants to be part of the NATO, and it will be 100 miles from United States, from Russia, putting in rockets. I don't hear anybody talk about that. So I don't think what Putin wants is that unreasonable. And what I understand is that if the United States promises that those weapons will stay away from the border of Russia, nothing's going to happen. But what I don't understand is that it was so clear for the United States not accept it, but Russia does the same thing, and now nobody seems to understand what Putin wants. I still think they will figure it out. I think the big problem after the Olympics is going to be China, because the way that things went here with the government of the United States, nobody is going to do anything against China. So I think they're going to take over Taiwan. And if the West is going to fight that, then we have the major war.
You think they're going to just invade Taiwan?
Well, or they're just going to make, I mean, I'm not an expert in military, but if they just make a blockade around Taiwan with a fleet, that's good enough.
So they'll just blockade them. They'll just stop everything in and out. You think that China's next move is going to be Taiwan?
Well, and then you have the same question. Is it reasonable, unreasonable? I mean, the guy, Chiang Kai-shek, he ran away. He distanced himself from the mainland China, and he made his own thing. So does the West want to say is whoever comes from China and starts his own province of China, we support them? It's not so easy. But again, you know, I lived for 20 years in the United States. The historical understanding of what happens in the world is not as good as the historical understanding of the Europeans.
Huh. And you think the big problem in the future is China, not Ukraine, not Russia, not any of that. So you're handicapping that thing with the Ukraine is they're going to work this out.
I don't think the West is going to war against Russia because they invade a piece of Ukraine. Like Biden said, if they invade a little bit, it's okay. You know, he already made the announcement to Putin that, you know, we're going to stand aside, nothing's going to happen.
So you don't think the war cycle, this is part of the war cycle. Ukraine,
No, I don't think
Russia.
it's part. No, I don't think so. I don't, what do I know? I talked to some politicians because in Holland I'm an economic advisor. So I asked them what the opinion of the European is, and they give me an insight. Nobody's for sure. So I only tell you what I hear and what I can deduct from there. But I don't think this is a major thing.
Ah, good deal. All right. But lay out how China is going to work out here the next few years, and why that's going to really be the war cycle.
Well, that's going to be a big war if United States guarantees the independence of Taiwan, together with the NATO. Then you're going to major war on your hands. The other problem is Iran, that nobody seems to take it seriously. As you know, my idea is that Iran is almost ready with all the rockets, and Israel, the enemy, has all the systems in place that they cannot hit Israel. But they're just gonna blackmail the Europeans and say, you do this and this and this. Otherwise, we send some rockets. And knowing the Europeans, they're just gonna give in. But it's like before Hitler came to power, everybody's asleep. But usually, like I said, when we talked before, usually situations that almost exist is not where the danger comes from. Usually it's the same as a stock market. It comes from when you don't expect it.
And where do you think the danger is? Where are people not looking? Where are people not?
Well,
looking?
They're not looking that they're in the East. If we talk about Iran, there is a different mentality also in Russia than in the West, and not everybody thinks like the United States. The United States always says we're the right thing. We know what the moral thing is to do. I remember when I was there, maybe you remember I was teaching in Torah College in Miami. I said, so how do you know what the right thing to do is? I mean, you can base it on faith, on God, but if not, so how do you know? And I gave an example. When I was studying to be a medical doctor, we're talking about the 70s and 80s, to do an abortion was not moral. But by the time I finished 10 years later, to refuse an abortion was not moral. And everybody knew then what's moral, and before it's moral. Everybody knows what's moral, and you can't even open the discussion. So they don't understand that Iran is negotiating. In the meantime, they do whatever they want, and Europe is not getting ready, and they're going to be blackmailed.
Ha! You think that Iran will blackmail Europe? What will they want out of them?
Well, they, for instance, want more rights for the Muslims. They want the Muslims to come there. They want more priests coming there. It's going to be that they also believe in their Messiah. Who knows what's true or not what's true? And it's their duty to bring the Messiah, which means is the infidels have to move, and if you don't kill them, they have to move for the Islam.
So you think that they want to take over Europe?
I think they're taking over Europe.
Taking over Europe.
I have friends who are comedians in the theaters, and they don't open their mouth anymore. Everybody's afraid to say whatever they think.
Really? How much of the population in Europe is Muslim now?
I really don't know, but in France, I would estimate maybe 30%. I don't know.
Wow.
Germany continues to bring in everybody. Now they have put in jail a lot of Syrians that were doing all kinds of crimes against humanity, but they just let everybody in. I once asked the question. Of course, you can't ask that question, but you have the same question in the United States. Just tell us how many people you want to bring in, so bring them in. 500 million, a billion. What do you want to do? It's the same thing got in Europe. The people are fugitives. They take a small boat. They go to Europe. You don't let them in. But when they sink the boat, then you're going to save them, and then you let them in. So let them in. Why do you have to risk their lives first? Tell me how many hundreds of millions of people you want to bring in from Africa, and let's do that.
Why do you think they're doing that? Is this like the globalist New World Order type thing where they're trying to wreck every Western economy?
I think United States does it because they hope these people are going to vote for the Democrats. And I think in Europe, they very much feel guilty about what happened in the Second World War. So they're very much afraid to say something because they can be called a racist. It's the same thing in the United States. I was sitting at a dentist, And the lady says, well, you're from Holland, you must like Le Pen. I says, Le Pen is from France, but he's right wing. And she says, you must also like Trump then. I says, well, I don't think he's doing such a bad thing. You should look at the person, you should look at his ideas and what he's doing. And I physically got attacked. 2 dentists had to come and save me because I was physically attacked.
Wow.
So I don't know where the world is going to.
What do you suppose will happen? You know, you're I know you kind of dabble in this because you do geopolitical also. What do you think is going to happen with the elections here in the United States? I don't know how the Democrats are going to stand up and go, wow, we raised your fuel prices. We've opened the border wide open. There's crime everywhere in all the cities. Didn't we do a great job? I mean, aren't the Democrats going to have a very hard time?
Well, you're closer than me because, like I said, I'm not for a couple of weeks in Brazil. You have to ask Democrat voters. Why would you vote for Democrats? I don't know the answer. I've no clue. I mean, Biden was happy that there was a virus. He didn't have to do discussions. He could sit in his room. They pushed him forward. And it seems you also have a vice president that nobody knows, that says once a month she says something that doesn't make any sense. And it's, for Europeans, it's unbelievable what's going on. But there seems to be people that see something good going on. I have friends who live in New York. They really don't go out after 6 o'clock at night. I remember living in Manhattan. And I says, well, it's so great over here. He says, well, Giuliani cleaned up the whole thing after the 70s, but now it's the whole thing again. So I have no idea what the motivation is to vote for Democrats right now.
So they're going to have a hard time in the 2022 election.
Yeah, but you never know. I don't know why people we don't really know what brings people voting for Democrats. So it's very hard. In our logic, it would say, why would you vote? But I don't know what the reasoning is. So as long as I don't understand the reasoning, I cannot really make up my mind what's going to happen.
When do you think the gold bull market will start again? Then we'll kind of dance around that subject. Gold, silver.
Yeah, well, it will still take a couple of months until it really starts going.
What's going to be the catalyst to get it going?
You see, I don't deal with that because, like I used to say, inflation brings up the gold price and deflation also brings up the gold price. If you have a market sell-off and institutions, I saw that in '87, for instance, why did the gold go down in a crisis? Because the people take out the money from the hedge funds and the hedge funds have to make money, so they sell their winners like the gold and silver. So the technical factors also. By now, the gold should be much higher if you think that Ukraine is a big problem. And I think inflation is a big problem. My chart, soon we can go to 12%. And I even have sent out to my subscribers a yearly chart on long-term interest rates going back 200 years. And you see there's a whole new cycle of 30 years starting of higher interest rates and inflation. So the stories that you hear when a stock goes down is not the real reason, and the stories that you hear why the supplies problems and that's why inflation goes up is not the real reason. It's just a cycle decides that inflation has to go up. And I wish that people would think a little bit longer view than jump from detail to detail because they forget the whole picture.
So you think that interest rates, we're in a long-term up cycle in interest rates?
For the next 30 years, yes, much higher.
Wow.
Like in the 80s. For
the next 30 years, interest rates are going to go much higher.
Right. Next time, I don't have it ready, but next time I'll send you the chart. It's a very interesting chart. It's 100% overlay of the interest rates and the cycle. And you will see it worked for 200 years. So I think it's continued to work.
And so what's a good play? Should you have money in a bank account and just try to play the interest rate, ladder it up?
The problem is, I would say as you know, but you don't know, but I do this advisory service for many, many years. People are always, and we talked about that when we said in 2020, the market can go up another 3%, but down 40%. People always want to make money. And I warned them, you're going to end up without money. So maybe remember we had this crash in the bond market that says, listen, you don't recognize it because for 40 years, bonds went only up. You don't even realize it can go down. And if you keep bonds, don't keep them in a bond fund because you don't even get your capital once you sell out. I had the same thing with the cryptocurrencies. we had a top of 70,000 and we went out and we didn't go short because it's too complicated, but we're still out of the cryptocurrencies. A lot of capital was destroyed. Now we got the same thing in the stock market. There is nowhere to go. It's a big problem. The housing market is still okay, but if this inflation continues up, also that is not going to be a safe place. So you're right. It's very difficult if you're not a trader to make some money. What we do is we decided that the commodity cycle is up for the next 10, 15 years. And so we work with, for instance, natural gas and crude oil, which most people don't do because it's futures. But then we work with USO, which is stock that follows the crude price, and UNG that follows the natural gas price. And we have to work with stocks that are following commodity markets. That's where we're going to make the money.
So you think that the commodity cycle is really the only place to go? Because you said there's no other stocks are at a peak. The bond market is at a peak. Rates are going to go up. Stocks are going to go down. And the only thing that's going to be anything worthwhile is the commodity sector, which is grain. I mean, wheat is like 7, 80.
Yeah, soya beans looks okay. Maybe you remember a couple of years there was Bartolomeo Romo asked me on CNBC, so how we're going to make money? And I said, you know what, I'm Dutch. And Dutch first think how we're not going to lose money. We don't always think how we're going to make money. So the major thing is how not to lose money. And well, for that you need cycles because you're going to have some buying opportunities, as we discussed before, in the bond market soon. What could it be? I don't know. One interesting thing is the inflation looks going up, but since September when the cycle topped, the Baltic dry index came down like 60–70%. So that's awesome. So that actually is a note that says, well, the economy is going to weaken. You have to follow all that stuff in order to be ready. And then the big problem is that markets look ahead. So they look at what happens in 1 year. And if you read the newspapers of tomorrow, you don't know what happens in 1 year. So what I used to tell the people that I work with, I think I was still at Goldman Sachs then, at 2007, 8, 9, when the market crashed, there were big institutions who was buying. Well, nobody was buying because of the news. And those institutions knew what the news would be right now in the 2020s. So now they're selling. And in 1 or 2 years, we know why they were selling. Like in 1 or 2 years, we know why they were buying in 2009. So instead of watching the newspapers and listening to the media, if you spend the same time in looking our cycles and trying to understand how big funds invest, it's much more worthwhile than listening to the media.
I was watching Bloomberg, and there was some big investor on there. He loves, always going to buy more. Going to buy Bitcoin at 30,000. You think it's going higher from here?
Well, Bitcoin has what we sent out made in a weekly chart, a head and shoulders. First, short term. Short term, there is this week a cycle low. And we said as long as there's no good close below, what was it? Oh, I don't have it ready. I thought it was 37,200 or so. Then we can see another bounce. The problem is, for people who understand it, if you look at the weekly chart or monthly chart, you see a head and shoulder that broke down. The neckline was about 40,000. And based on the theory that you can Google, if you don't know it yet, then we can go as low as 10,000.
Wow.
We're still out, even that I expect now a bounce. But like I said, let me just repeat, people who come through you, if they mention it, they get the research for free 4 times a week, 4 months, and we update 4 times long and short-term Ethereum and Bitcoin. So then you're a bit informed what we expect and how we calculate it.
Cool. All right. Your war cycle, is that imminent or is that a ways off?
No, that's imminent.
Oh, really?
That's really imminent. Should have been already a year and a half ago. Because as you remember, we talked about big wars in 1718, then Napoleon in 1818, then the First World War in 1918. And if you look for a cycle that comes back every 100 years, there's always a big cycle by the end of the second decade of a new era. Now, it sounds very strange, But there's strange things, like I mentioned one time, to convince people that there's strange things, but they work. Maybe you remember that we talked about the year ending with a 7. And then we said there was a big top in 1907, also in the 1800s. Then 1929 is the only time it didn't work. But then it did catch up and it came down big in 1929. 1937, 47, 57, 67, 87, 2007, 2017, 18, it came down. Don't ask me, but you should just work whatever works always and just expect it to continue to work. So it's the same thing with the war cycle. It seems ridiculous to say that every 100 years, at the end of the second decade of a new century, there's a big war. But if you Google it, big wars around 900, 1000, 1100, 1200, 1300 until now, it works for 100%. So for now, we expect the same thing to happen. Now, as you know, I did longer term cycles going back 3,000 years to the Mandarin Empire in China. And there are also some long term cycles that look very ominous, and it's a scary world right now. Wow. Maybe you remember also, maybe you remember 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I mentioned to you that for the moment, the social unrest in the United States is more worrisome than the wars. Well, that's exactly what we got.
That is what you got. That was a big call. You made that call. You said, because I was asking about the war cycle, and you said, I'm more worried about the domestic violence than I am any big external war right now. And now are you worried about domestic violence now? You're worried about external war now?
Well, because I still think domestic violence is going to get worse.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 60-year cycle. The last time was in the 60s. You know what happened? The students were killed by the police, or whatever. It was big riots. And we didn't get that far yet, so I think it's still going to get worse.
Wow. So war cycle imminent, and still big problems with domestic violence.
Correct.
Wow. Well, how long does this last?
Well, it can last 10, 12, 13 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so these are sociological cycles. There are explanations. They say, listen, why is it 60 years? Because a normal lifespan that you watch what's going on is 60 years, and after that people forgot how terrible it was, so they start all over again making the same problems. And the same thing with wars. The generation forgot how bad the war was, so they're up to a new war. But that's a sociological explanation, like to explain why the Dow goes down. I don't really know if that's valid. Again, what we do is we do the cycle work. We can tell you what happens and when it happens and what the price level is. And I don't try to make interpretation why things happen.
And you think that the war with China is imminent? I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep coming back to this, but
I think at least they wait till after the Olympics. But if Biden and the administration continues to be weak like this, if I would be a Chinese leader, this is the best time to start it. You know, we don't want to wait till maybe Trump comes back. Then you have to postpone it again. Yeah.
Tony Blinken, the man that proves I can be Secretary of State. Okay, good. He's an idiot. Okay, Charles Nenner, the Charles Nenner Research Center. It's very good. Quick, 30 minutes. Very interesting. Very insightful. But you think we're in imminent war is imminent with China? Wow, that's the headline, isn't it?
Well, not imminent. Could take another 2 years, but you know, let's hope that the Democrats don't stay in power.
Okay, all right. But so but the next war is going to be with China. Forget Russia.
I think so.
Next war.
Maybe not. I just think they're going to block Taiwan, and then the West has to decide if they're going to unblock it or not. If they don't do it, maybe we can prevent a war.
Yeah. No, I think that they would. They can't let the semiconductor industry fall in the hands of China, because that's what Taiwan is, the semiconductor industry.
Yeah, but I think I think they would not win a war against China.
The
people are ruthless, and they much more organized, and all Americans are in doubt what the right thing is to do. You know, it's not so simple.
Yeah. Well, it'd go nuclear in a hot minute, right?